GM Legendary. Welcome back to another episode of NFT World. We are on episode 10. First double digit episode, Legendary. How are you feeling about that?
GM, that's exciting. We're getting in the double digits. Next milestone is going to be the triple digits. I like it. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, double digits sounds good. Triple digits to come. Maybe if we execute on all of the plans that we've just spent the last 2 hours discussing, we might be able to get there pretty fast if we're upping our production content in some way.
Which we'll certainly do, but we are still a bit in the process of figuring out what is going to end up in the podcast, what's going to stay on Twitter Spaces only. I feel we spent the entire morning discussing that, but we made some very good progress. So I'm very excited for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. One of my main reflections on all of this stuff is people, either people don't realize, or I guess I never realized the amount you need to think about logistically to execute on a media plan. So yes, we are producing X amount per week at the moment, but there's so much more that goes on behind the scenes in order to even push that content out. It's one thing actually finding the time to record and do that. There's also the planning, there's also the pre-marketing, there's also the post-marketing. And particularly when you've got a number of things going on at the same time, there's just a kind of a cycle or this interesting workflow that you absolutely must work through for things to be working optimally. And yeah, it's a lot of stuff to work through, and it's very interesting. And when you're adding pieces to the workflow, it becomes a bit complicated, but also interesting to kind of strategize about.
Yeah, I mean, the complexity has certainly increased. Like I remember when I worked in marketing departments or in social media, for smaller projects, I used to be doing very well without a marketing and content plan, because it was just able, to schedule that in my head and follow my own schedule. But with all the moving pieces, with the Discord, with the content that we produce there, with the Twitter Spaces, with the podcast, it's really getting a lot. And it's definitely good that we put it all on paper and strategized. And I'm still experimenting a bit with time zones and timing and scheduling stuff, and not trying to get in the way of the biggest spaces, etc. And just finding a schedule that works for our audience, and obviously it also works for us, is challenging, really.
Yeah, that's the other main point, isn't it? Like finding operating in a environment which is 24/7, also kind of 7 days a week, and also with interested parties all over the world, is really, really tricky. And I think that was one of the main conclusions we came to just now as we were talking things out. It was like we were kind of asking the question, well, when could we do this? When could we do this? Oh, would this work for that time zone? Would it work for another time zone? But ultimately, if it doesn't work for us long term, it's just not doable. So thinking first what works for us, and then thinking, okay, well, does this work for everyone else? I know it's kind of backwards because you're meant to think of the consumer first, but for example, if the best time was midnight for our time zone, it's just not practical for us to operate in that way. So the question becomes, well, how do we do it at a time that works for us, and within a reasonable time frame, how do we make that work for everyone else too?
Yeah, exactly. And if it doesn't work for us, we cannot really produce it in a consistent basis, which is ultimately the thing that we absolutely want to do, right?
Yeah. And also in a way, there'll be various live things happening, but the beauty of some of the stuff now, certainly from the data that I've seen, is that lots of the stuff can be caught up on, and people do catch up. And sometimes, if anything, what all the streaming services have shown us is that people will be very happy to actually not want to tune in live and just be able to tune in when they are free, because people are quite time poor in general and want something that is more convenient. So maybe in a way people prioritize the live thing too much, because it's nice to have, but often people just want something on demand.
Yeah, that's true. That's something we've not only seen with our spaces, but we also see with the biggest spaces in crypto and NFT. Really, that yes, they have a certain amount of people that listen in live, even if it goes, in the four digits, but way more people than listen to the recording.
Yeah, I think that's super important. So yeah, maybe triple digits won't be so far away as we move forward. But getting into this week's episode properly, it feels pretty positive in NFT world at the moment, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's quite a nice sentiment. I mean, we've
How has this changed? Why do we go one week from being in despair and depression to next week feeling great about ourselves? Why does this keep happening?
hope. I think hope is a big one, kind of, because fundamentally nothing has changed, right? The world didn't get a better place. We didn't
Yeah.
fix any of the macro issues. People get used to it to a certain extent, and
Well, Boris Johnson lost his job in the UK.
that's true. That's true. Yeah.
I don't know if that's had a effect on the markets at all.
You think Boris Johnson is pumping the NFT market overall?
Boris Johnson lost his job as prime minister and has decided to sweep all the floors.
In his free time now.
Yes, this is what has happened.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah. No, but I don't know. Like, probably people get used to it and then get used to a, more difficult market situation and consolidate into NFTs again. I think there also was an interesting statistic by NFTstatistics.eth who put out that the buying volume in terms of individual buyers buying on average 3 NFTs per day on OpenSea is at an all-time high. So it seems like some confidence is back in terms of, okay, we are surviving this, we are not going to zero, and we can very well go back to buying NFTs, especially as they're like very cheap in terms of US dollar value, certainly. Could be a bit of that sentiment.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a move into, and I think we probably touched on this a while ago. There's been a move into kind of the more quality projects. And I've noticed, for example, Xcopy has been, people have been getting into that quite heavily again.
Mm-hmm.
I have a set of what they called, the, I can't even remember the name now. The green, yellow, and multicolored. Oh God, I can't even remember the name. I have a triptych of that though, and that's been moving, as well as the grifters in particular. And
Yeah.
one of the things I keep thinking about is just the amount that the identity, inverted commas, NFTs will move. Like Xcopy's got all this art, all this cool work, but the face which you can put as your profile picture will still just keep selling to such a degree. And I know there's a smaller supply there. I think there's only 666,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I keep coming back to that. But the broad point seems to be that yes, people are willing to buy again, but only at the very top end. Yeah. What have you thought about that top end? What have you noticed?
Um, CryptoPunks are getting closer again to the Bored Ape floor. And like CryptoPunks are almost up to 80 ETH floor. Bored Apes also moved a bit up. They're like at 99 right now. But they are closing the gap, and especially the blue chip art trend continued. Gazers had a massive run last week. Was quite happy to see the Gazer floor being like at 14 ETH. I think it's now at 11 or 12.
And very,
Fidenzas,
and very
Fidenzas.
fortunately, the squiggle floor tripled after I said that I wanted to buy, but I did not buy. So that was fun.
I'm happy that I listened to your advice and I did get one.
Well, I'm happy I gave my advice to you for you to take advantage of, but didn't do it myself. But yeah, Squiggle, as I said, so iconic. But yeah, so there's been significant movement on these pieces which are perceived to be unique and quality in some way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What did you think about? There was the obviously the Bored Ape Yacht Club, Yuga Labs NFTs are premium NFTs,
Mhm.
undoubtedly. What did you think about the? I saw this graph where the Bored Ape Kennel Club buying activity literally shot up in a straight line, and once again, people started to suggest that there may have been insider trading going on there. What's your? I don't know much about the Kennel Club, but what what's your take on that situation?
Yeah. So the thing is, the kennels, the dogs, they always had a place in the roadmap, and it was like always pretty evident that they're gonna play an important role in the future, right? And it's kind of funny to see, like, every time we see a sudden pump in any NFT project, really, right now, there's now always a larger and larger group of people screaming that's insider trading, and sometimes it might be the case that it's insider trading, but I think most of the times it's really someone's picking up a rumor, spreading a rumor, pointing out something in a roadmap, or pointing out something that's already was evident, but has like the massive reach or somehow gets viral, and then people start buying, and then people see other people buying, and they FOMO in, and we get like such a massive increase, sudden massive increase in floor price, and then probably the people that missed it scream insider trading. I don't know. I don't think there was like any kind of insider trading with the Bored Ape kennels.
Yeah, it's super hard to say. It's yeah, I definitely don't know the answer, but I definitely think as soon as there's momentum, people just start to assume that. But obviously, there's so many times where people start piling into something, and it can't always be the case that there's insider trading on something. I mean, the squiggles have tripled in the last week, basically, or the last
Yeah,
10 days at least. That's not insider trading. It's just people have decided that they're wildly undervalued for what they are.
yeah. That, and they're
Um,
also on the Wake Me United. They also
mm,
made it on the Adidas soccer outfit.
yeah, that's true. I think that was known for some time though. Like
Yeah,
they,
that was
it
public. That was public, and
that was
we've
very much public for a long time. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting, but yeah, as you said, there's a definite increase or general improvement in overall sentiment in the NFT market. It suddenly doesn't feel so terrible to be holding many NFTs at the moment. Portfolios are probably recovering to some degree, albeit to a small degree, given how far we've fallen and the value of ETH, uh, the ETH decline over the last month or two.
Yeah, absolutely. I've even seen it on Super Rare, where one of the pieces that I held in my collection, suddenly a little bidding war started on that on the weekend, and it ended up with moderates buying Toth by George Boya, where I have the NFT and I also have the physical one. You can see it right now in my background.
Ah,
That's the
very nice.
physical matching the NFT. And then people commented on the sale, oh, it's good to see moderates back at buying art. So apparently across the board, activity is increasing, and it seems like some people are who took a break are, you know, getting back into the space, which is a nice sentiment to see.
Yeah, that's very nice. So you mentioned like I like every now and again go moving the conversation into the art stuff is quite nice because it's a welcome relief from the I don't know, the constant shilling of various profile picture projects. But you said in real life, you've also been doing some art stuff. Is that right? Like, what have you, in particular, the last week, you've been up to a few things. What's been going on there?
Yeah, last week I had a series of meetings at some top tier galleries in Vienna, and I wanted to explore what their thought or stance is on NFTs in general. And so basically, there's like two types of galleries, right? There's galleries that buy all the pictures and then sell them, and there's galleries that basically sell the pictures that they don't own for a commission to potential collectors. And I kind of wanted to figure out what their general take on NFTs is. it was interesting to see that even like the top tier galleries who are like, nope, NFTs are not of any relevance to us or our audience right now. Like we find the technology interesting and we're going to point you to some galleries who, have that customer segment who might buy NFTs, but they are not for us because our customers don't want that really. They want to have physical pictures. That was like really the minority that, turned me down from the get go. And even they were like very friendly and polite and helping out to connect me to other galleries. And it was interesting to see that like the general consensus was we see that NFTs and digital art are incredibly relevant. We see that this is the type of art that, our generation is going to buy, that people who are accumulating money over the next 10, 20, 30 years are going to buy massively. Right now, our customers are in their 50s, 60s, or 70s mostly. And it's not for them, but we know and we are very aware of the fact that we have to transition into NFTs because the new customers who are going to accumulate wealth, they will have a way higher demand for NFTs, but they're not sure how to really make the first step. They very much like the thought of digitals, so like of physical artwork that comes with an NFT or vice versa. And they kind of need help on that onboarding part, on that process. They have a very positive stance towards it, but they need help to make that change or that transition kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's completely fair. That's completely fair from them from their perspective. They probably have a bunch of people, and that actually echoes what someone said at the Proof of People conference, NFT conference festival that I went to last week, where someone from Phillips, the auction house in London, was speaking about people, their kind of typical buyer, and explaining that yes, people were interested, but there's just such a barrier in terms of education, understanding, security. There's all sorts of things that are in the way of the typical customer accessing this digital art in its current form. So yeah, it makes sense that people would like to have a reasonable compromise of digital with physical, just so it kind of makes sense to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was also an interesting point that one of the gallerists pointed out was like, we have the gallery, a prime location in the inner city, couple hundred of square meters. It is incredibly expensive to, rent out that space to maintain it and to use it to showcase art to people. 99% of the people don't buy because it's just too expensive, and like looking at nice art. And of course, the galleries are public to the most extent. And they did think about that. If they would sell digital first and would have like, I don't know, any kind of metaverse experience, the logistics of the business model would completely change. And I personally think it's a natural evolution. Like if I think back when, Gary Vee in, what was it, in 2007, 2008, was like, he's going to sell wine on the internet at his dad's store. And everyone was like, who wants to buy wine on the internet? And he was like, everybody will do that. And like, we kind of see the same with art right now. Like people, I want to experience art physical. I want to see the painting. And that's going to change as well. Like we shifted so much to buying online. I don't see why art would be any different from that, really.
Yeah, and I think there'll always be a space for this physical element. What they should do, from my perspective, is, because I've seen this work really well in London, and I just watch people as they go about their business when they do attend these physical spaces, is when people have these VR capable goggles or headsets or whatever, and they have a proportion of their physical in real life space dedicated to that, people are queuing up for it. Like people want to put that headset on and find out like what the hell is going on in this world. And it's an interesting, novel experience. They enjoy it. I think that galleries and other similar people must incorporate that at a minimum. Like you've got to allow people to experience that future thing. And as you say, most people don't buy, but just having that novel experience is something which people do go to the shops for. Because at the moment, the problem with retail physical spaces is that if you can't, like, there's no reason for anyone to come in because they can just buy whatever online.
Yeah.
So retail physical spaces need to consider, well, what can I give you or offer you that you can't get from the comfort of your sofa? And assuming that not everyone has an AR, VR capable headset, which they don't at the moment, realistically, that would be a way to create an experience in-house, which is something unique, something novel, which would move people off their sofa.
Yeah. If I absolutely agree. And I would even go further. Like if I were a gallery, what I would do is I would get a bunch of, museum grade screens, beautiful OLED screens, display art. You could display anything from super rare, OpenSea, whatever you think that fits with, the general style of what your audience likes to buy. Like imagine having a Fidenza there and, people can see it just like they could see a physical painting. And if someone's like, hey, I want to buy that, then you could either be like, okay, there's more of this. I'm showing you some more Fidenzas. Or, yes, you want to buy that. Okay, I'm going to do the deal for you. I'm going to buy it off OpenSea. I'm going to move it to a ledger. I'm going to give you the ledger, help you store that securely. And I'm going to give you one of those digital frames, display your Fidenza on it. And I'm going to charge a premium for that. Like Fidenza floor is, what is it, 110 ETH right now? Charge, I don't know, 10% for that on top. Make it 120 ETH. And you don't have to spend the, 110K on the Fidenza just to display it in your gallery. And if you make a sale, you then buy it. You need way less cash flow to manage operations. You can cater way faster to the needs of your customer. And you're way more flexible. Because like all the galleries who are doing exhibitions, they were like, we do 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 exhibitions per year because the logistics and cost make it impossible to do more than that. But they would love to have like a monthly event or gathering. So, but yeah, this is what I would do if I had a gallery.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's definitely space for them to innovate, for sure. One of the things I saw last week was, I was at the Proof of People event and I did some speaking on the topic of Web3 and the generational opportunity there. And it was kind of cool because, again, physical spaces, getting people together, this is the other element which I think people need to consider. Getting people together in physical spaces does still matter. And one of the things we were talking about was, how much of our online presence and online marketing translates into sales. And I think one of the things I'm thinking about more and more now is that in the end, you simply you can't replace these physical interactions. Like I could have delivered that talk on Web3 and the opportunities online, and people would appreciate it. It would be the transfer of knowledge, and that would be fine. But there's something about doing it face to face in front of people, and then people can ask the questions there and then. And it was a really good attendance. So I was in this kind of smaller room. I wasn't on the main stage. I was on a separate stage, but it was like completely packed. A lot of interested listeners from a wide range of age groups and backgrounds. A lot of questions after, and some good questions as well. Being quite skeptical about Web3, which was good, but something about doing it in real life, there's something different there. There's a different energy. And I think people need to lean into that hard when they consider how to keep creating experiences in this space.
It's hard to pinpoint the difference, but certainly there is a massive difference if you speak in real life or attend an in real life event as opposed to doing it merely online. But you said there were a couple of critical questions that you appreciated. Did any in particular stand out, and how did you tackle it?
Yeah, so I think one of the good questions was from someone who was fairly confident that there is no good reason why a company would want to decentralize. Like, it doesn't make any sense from a company perspective and he was giving examples. So, I don't know, Apple, Facebook, very, very profitable companies. He was saying, well, why would they want to decentralize? Why would you create this whole other organizational body like a DAO, for example, who suddenly has some sort of governance over you when they are neither qualified nor experienced enough to run anything really to do with your product or things of that nature. And I think one of the ways I answered was, look, I think there's some confusion as to the term DAO right now, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, is very, very muddy. Like, it's not clear what a DAO is or what it represents, because what it literally means is that there is an organization that essentially operates without anyone ruling it. It's meant to operate almost like a smart contract where people come together to operate, but there's no hierarchy, there's no decision making. It's like communally done. But practically, there's real difficulties around that, and one of the things DAOs struggle with is participation, is voting, and governance related to that. So I thought he raised some valid points. But if you were to get rid of the word DAO and say, well, why might a company release some NFTs and create a group around it? Like, forget the word DAO. Now, is there a reason why Apple or Facebook, or let's take Apple, for example, would want to release 10,000 NFTs? And the answer to that would be, well, that could be interesting. Would 10,000 people in the world want to say that Apple have chosen 4 colors for the next iPhone? Do you want to let a group of your 10,000 super fans pick the 5th one? Like, do you want to let these 10,000 people, because the product is often so high in demand, would you want to allow 10,000 people to get the guaranteed spot when it comes through, when the next iPhone ships? And it's like, well, that's actually very doable, which means that the NFT is a completely whole different revenue stream. Like, that doesn't exist right now. That's not something which a company is able to capitalize on because it doesn't exist. It's a whole new stream. And would it be annoying to have 10,000 people giving their opinions on certain things? Potentially. But the point is, this is a whole new stream, and you can define very clearly, look, you will get to pick the 5th color of the iPhone. You will get priority for when certain products launch. But no, you do not design. You're not going to say how bright the screen should be. You're not going to be engineering the phone inside out. We have people for that already. So I think there's definitely scope for people to work with some of their super fans in a way by creating a group of people. But I think the main confusion on reflection was that people think of the word DAO and they think that you're literally, and they think that they talk about the term decentralization and they think you're literally giving away all of your power in your company. And yes, that's one thing that people do pursue. I don't think it's necessarily the right thing to pursue, but there's all sorts of other options which are far more reasonable.
Yeah, and I mean, to a certain extent, like all the companies, that you mentioned are already decentralized because they are publicly traded, and shareholders are spread all over the world, and they do have some certain say in the company, obviously, but they are not the ones to, as you said, design the new iPhone. And I find it the other point that you made, connecting to your super fans, that is so viable, because it reminds me so much of my time working at the Big Four in consulting. And we had one project with a telecommunications company, and they really, really, really tried to find a structure to implement open innovation. So open innovation basically is you try to create or foster innovation outside of the company, to have your customers be the ones who come up with new innovations for your company, because they are using the product every day. They have the feedback, and you want to get that source and stream of information and create an inflow into your company and foster that open innovation process. And they struggled. because they struggle to speak to customers, they struggle to identify who are the super fans, and they struggle to incentivize them to be like, okay, if I have an idea, how do I reach you? Who do I talk to? How could I even, make sure that someone listens and then decides if it gets implemented or not? And why would I even do that? Why would I, use my time to do that? And NFTs definitely are a beautiful way to help with this, especially if it's so transparent, who owns your NFT and who's your super fan really.
Yeah, definitely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's the way to answer that question, which also accepts the real challenges that the person was making. Like if you think that decentralization means, which to be fair, decentralization does mean that you're meant to be giving away governance. So the point that he was making was not irrelevant, but it was mixing a couple of things, I think. And there are all sorts of ways to opportunities in Web3, which is not to do with decentralization. Like it doesn't have to be decentralized for you to produce a product on the blockchain. So yeah, that was a super cool talk. It was also a really awesome 3 days event, really well attended. It was done by Vertical Crypto, who I'm learning more and more about. She's really lovely, and I was super grateful to have the opportunity to speak there. It was a really, really enjoyable time. I liked it a lot. And
Was
also,
it?
I don't know if have you been to London before and gone to Fabric?
Yes, actually, yes.
Have you been to Fabric?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's in that I mean, it's actually the first time I've been there. I'm a Londoner, but hadn't gone before. It's a it's a it's like an iconic place in London, and what they wanted to do was host it in a place of kind of music and culture as a kind of representation that, look, what we're doing now in this space is also very cultural and kind of pushing the space culture forward, and that's sort of what Fabric has represented for a long time as well. So really cool.
Are they planning to do it next year again, or was it a one-off event?
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know about their future plans, but I think if they definitely have the team to pull it off. It was amazing because I think they'd established all of these screens and all of this apparatus inside of the club, which is underground, and it's a club ultimately. And it was like really hard to navigate. So it was a huge logistical operation, and really quite impressive that they were able to do that. So that was pretty impressive from their perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like it.
So thinking about, we want to move on to one of the interesting news stories in NFT world, which was the Saudis mint over the weekend. One point that you might not actually know is that on the 9th, it was actually coordinated with Eid,
Mm-hmm.
like as in specifically to do that, which again, as part of their marketing strategy, probably quite smart. Also, their marketing strategy in general was pretty well. It certainly got a hell of a lot of engagement. I'm just going to say, for the people who don't know, the Saudis are, let me tell you, if you don't know what the Saudis are. Oh, that's weird. When you search for the Saudis, it doesn't actually come up with the NFT. Apparently there are other Saudis in the world. Okay, here we go. The Saudis. Oh, there's not a great description. 5,555 Saudis are max bidding. So this is like a CryptoPunk derivative project, which are focused on which are, how do you describe them? A derivative of the CryptoPunks, but in a way that imitates, or they're depicted as Saudis. Where do we start on this? Legendary.
I think you made a very good point about their marketing, and they particularly mentioning that it's going to be a free mint on a significant date. All the content, all the memes that they created, the lingo that they used, like really worked. Let's say it worked. Engagement they got is great, but I also feel like it's a very fine line to walk between playing with some cliches but also being like politically correct and not offending people, it's very
Yeah.
difficult to navigate that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because this, we were just talking off air about this. I can't believe that someone didn't try to cancel it already. Like, it's fairly. I mean, there's 2 points to make. A, yes, it's dealing with some cliches and cultural stereotypes as such, but B, there's sincere attempts at comedy to be made here, right? Like the dubbing, for example, of videos where um they kind of have clips of various sheikhs and then they put English subtitles of what is being said, although it's obviously not the real words being said. Like, some of that stuff is funny. Like, that's someone's art where they have literally, on delivery of the way that the people are speaking and the language that they've chosen, it's funny. Like, people have put a decent amount of effort into those things, quite kind of high effort comedic memes. But yes, they're playing into certain stereotypes. Um,
And it seems
and
like they're
yeah,
creating a trend, right? Because last time we talked, about someone criticizing or stating that pixel vault isn't successful because they're on pixel vault derivatives. And by scrolling Twitter today, off air before we started recording, we found what? We found the Turks, who are a Saudi derivative. You found
the Jews.
basically the Jews, the moonbirds depicted,
Oh,
the Saudi
yeah,
moonbirds, the
the
like
Saudi
unofficial
birds.
pets, the Saudi birds. That was the name. So I think derivatives are a good measure ultimately to see if the idea or the concept that you had is successful because people want to copy it. And it's still like
It's
copying something is the highest form of recognition.
it's funny though because you now think that we're now in the stage of like the derivative of the derivative. So now we're thinking of Saudi birds as a derivative of Saudis, when
Yeah,
actually Saudi birds is a derivative of, well, moonbirds
it's a
and
moonbird.
crypto punks in a way.
It's a moonbird derivative that takes quote unquote cultural inspiration from the Saudis, and the Saudis ultimately are still a CryptoPunk derivative, um, and kind of similar in spirit to the Habibis, I'd say.
Hmm.
So,
So
but
how do we make sense of this? Like, I think, why would you say this has become popular?
well, I would really make the point and be like, because people are specifically trying to copy that success story. They've seen the massive ETH volume in the, what was it, four? What's the overall volume of the Saudis by now? Let's quickly check. It is
6.6K.
6.6K on OpenSea, right? So they've seen the massive success. They've been all over Twitter, and really that people try to copy that and try to create the Turks, try to create the Saudi birds, and very, very similar to when the goblins showed up, and we've seen Hobotown, Orktown, Elftown copying or trying to copy Goblin Town. So that's like probably when people start copying you, that you set a trend with something you did.
But what do you think? So yeah, I agree. I agree with those points. Like, there's definitely the success element that they're trying to imitate. But why do you think the Saudis, either as a meme or just as the NFT, like, how did they get their momentum? Do you think it was just through the strength of their marketing and their memes, essentially?
The marketing, yeah. The marketing, the fact that they started depicting various influencers in the crypto space
Oh
as
yeah,
a Saudi
totally.
version of themselves. And they reacted to it. Like, I don't know if there has been, some background deals on that and they reached out to them, or if they genuinely were like, hey, this is funny seeing myself as a Saudi version of my PFP or my actual picture or whatever it was. Because they not only did the crypto influencers, they also did Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, etc. Also,
Mm,
like the narrative that the Saudis are here to save our bags, basically, and that the oil money is
yes.
gonna pump into into the crypto market, like the overall
Yeah,
macro
that's
narrative
a
that they played
helpful.
is
Yeah.
helpful, and also connecting to the influencers. And as I said, we don't know if they genuinely reacted to that because this is how they became aware of the project, or if they have been reaching out to them privately. But they really managed to speak to a lot of subgroups and sub communities in the NFT space and create like this general awareness and buzz.
Yeah, my general take on it is what I yeah, my general take is I think it's fine. I know that there were certain people who might get offended by it, and I guess the question would be, well, are there any, say you're allowed to do it about this group? This is what people would say. I'm not saying I think these things, but this is the argument, right? Okay, you're allowed to do it about this group. What about if they do it about another group? What if they do it about another group of people? Like, is there a type of group of people that is not, that you're not allowed to do these derivatives about, or you're not allowed to poke fun at, or you're not allowed to use cultural stereotypes or cliches about as a way to create something funny to make people laugh? I'm usually of the opinion that if the sincere intention is to just have a laugh and not take things too seriously, I would usually think that that's appropriate. Obviously, there's a line somewhere where things become disrespectful, but my general take is that I just thought the memes were too good. Like, it was too good. And also it was unique. Like, I hadn't seen people put random people's faces on the thing. I hadn't seen people do like such good dubbing where they did the subtitles. The subtitling was done really well from a kind of comedic, almost artistic perspective. I actually thought it was fairly high. People will say, "Oh, it's a derivative project; it's not high effort." But I think people would have spent a serious amount of time working on, okay, this is what the people in the video are doing. I'm going to choose this language in order to match it properly. So I actually think it was fairly high effort in in a weird way.
Yeah, in a way, it's marketing as art.
Yeah.
The interesting question is, and I don't really know, like, are they here to build a community? Are they here to build a long term roadmap? But I absolutely agree with your notion that there was a lot of effort put in executing on the marketing to get to the point where they are right now. I mean, they minted on the weekend, and we are speaking about a 0.75 ETH floor.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fairly significant. And one of the other things we wanted to talk about in relation to them was the very strong reaction that there was to what people thought was an influencer pump, right? So people thought that, well, this was a free mint, and there were either multiple influencers or one influencer in particular who sold a significant number kind of straight away, just out of the gate, just sold. And therefore it was tarnished as a kind of, well, this is just an influencer based project. If it weren't for them, it wouldn't have taken off at all. First, before we dive into the actual details of the influencer, do you think that's fair when people say, like, okay, this is an influencer based project? Because as you said, marketing is a reality of the situation. You've got to do certain things to get the word out on your project, right?
I think it goes two ways, as long as people listen to their favorite influencers, buy what their influencer tells them to buy, there's obviously going to be projects who, well, try to connect with said influencers and get them to promote and market the project, right? So those two things go together. And yes, the project can be driven by influencers and help with the marketing, but ultimately that's not going to decide whether this project is going to be here to build in the long term, in the long run, and build a community, or if it's just a quick pump and dump. It can be both, and it's not relevant if it was pumped by influencers or not, in my opinion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's a marketing reality of things. You've got to try various avenues as a business to get people's attention. So it's kind of not relevant from the influencer perspective, though. So the influencer in question was Farouk, who lots of people. I mean, it seems to be the case. You either love him or you hate him from the general sentiment. And to be fair to him, like he's got a huge following. Like lots of people do fight think he's very very useful for the space and does a great job at hosting, providing information, supporting people. But the thing in question here was that supposedly people were allowed to mint two, or if you won the raffle maybe you were allowed to mint two, but he for some reason was able to mint 10. And so naturally that's a huge disproportionate allocation. And then it was sort of argued that he was dumping on his, this again, this is me summarizing the various tweets that I've seen. Some people were saying that he was dumping on his followers as, when he sold all of those 10 NFTs which he minted. What's your take on that?
Yeah, like as you said, if you look at it on an objective level, people typically could mint two. He minted 10 from what it looks like. He minted it himself. It wasn't minted to him from what we could tell from the contract. And after minting, he listed and sold them. So I don't really see it as dumping on his followers, really, because he wasn't like, constantly shilling that project. I think he tweeted about it once, and I don't know, I'm not in his spaces, probably mentioned it there as well, I guess. But it wasn't like he's, hosting spaces with the Saudis, building up momentum, etc., pumping the floor price, and then be the one to open the floodgates and dumping all of his supply. He straight sold after mint. And if there was like a marketing agreement in place with the Saudis and Farouk, which was like, you share our tweet, you get a higher allocation in the initial mint, and you can sell that, and that's your pay, that's fair, then the question really should be, was it disclosed as an ad or not? That I don't know because I didn't follow that. And I am always of the opinion, this should be done transparently, and advertising should be disclosed as advertising always. But I don't really see the dump on your follower element. I see why people get upset. I see, that in the overall context, it looks a bit shady. It doesn't look very good in a reputational way. I don't really understand. Like, I think that Farouk is aware of, if he does something like that the optics aren't the best and that he will get a backlash on social media for doing that. And I don't think that it's worth to do that for like 20 ETH, 30 ETH, or however much he made with selling those 10 Saudis. But I specifically don't see it as dumping on his followers, because there wasn't like the time to build hype, momentum, blah, 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 pump the floor price and then dump.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think as well. I think the dumping on followers thing has to be separated from it, because if he's not tweeting about it, and this is not just about Farouk, right? This is about how influencers or people who are used to market conduct themselves in the space. And if there isn't an agreement in place between two parties and they're not paid to communicate regularly about the NFT to get the message out, it can't really be decided that that's dumping on the followers. Because, and also one of the interesting things we were discussing off air also is that people who are prominent people are often used to a certain degree by projects by sending them things for free. Now, we've looked at the contract and we said that we think this was not one of those cases, but it is a bit of a strange position to be in when you get given a bunch of assets and then what, you're just not allowed to sell them because you are the person that you are, even though you've got no agreement with the people. So the interesting thing I would like to know, and this is why I've honed in on that 10 aspect, I'd kind of want to know, well, why was there 10 and everyone else got 2? Because if it was just 2, I think that maybe the reaction on Twitter in general would have been calmer, because it's like, well, you got the same as everyone else. Probably nothing to see here. And just the fact that it was 5 times more than everyone else, that made people think, something's up.
Yeah. And again, this is like a lack of transparency because like everyone in this space is, loving that blockchain is so transparent. And I know I keep probably repeating myself, through all of our podcasts, but ultimately, if the blockchain is transparent and you love the transparency about it, then be transparent in the way you do business. If this is not referring to Farouk, right? Like if I think, for example, about us and 32 Dreams, and we went into Pio spaces to talk about what we are building with 32 Dreams. And Pio is super transparent about that. Like it was mentioned a couple of times throughout the entire Twitter space. This is today's sponsors. This is B-Check and Legendary. They are working on 32 Dreams before the interview, in the beginning, in the end. And they're like disclosing, okay, this is a sponsored appearance that we were on that podcast. And this is a fair thing to do, right? And it wouldn't be like, oh no, they invited us because we are so cool. No, it was a sponsored thing. And it's a fair play. That's, a fair play in marketing. That's a fair play in trying, in us trying to reach a new audience. And this is like, if I, this is like my own moral standard that I want to disclose and be transparent about anything, about everything that I do. And probably like influencers who navigate themselves into a spot where they're like publicly criticized for, dumping something quote unquote on the followers or whatnot could avoid that if they just were transparent about what's going on in the background.
Yeah, I agree with that point. It's ultimately about transparency, and I sympathize with them only to the extent that sometimes things are done out like without their consent. Like I have read a variety of things where people are just like, well, no one asks me when they send all this stuff to my wallet. Like half the time they don't even know stuff is there. So I sympathize to that extent. But in this instance, I would just like to know why the 10, basically. That's the kind of interesting point. If there was if the answer to the why 10 was, that's just what they allowed me to do. Because I mean, it's not unforeseeable for them to think, well, he should mint 10. If he could mint 10, then maybe that's just still good for the project, even if he sells. Because then again, because if you think about it from this way. He mints 10, he sells 10, everyone gets annoyed about it on Twitter, then so much more publicity for the project. I don't know if people would think about it to that degree, whether you were the project thinking, right, if we allow this one person to mint 10 and they do and they sell, then that's going to create a complete storm on Twitter. And therefore, that's going to be great publicity. I don't know if people would think about it to that degree, but it definitely got people thinking about it.
I certainly think this is the case sometimes because, like, let's say any publicity is good publicity is a very old one. It's a well-known play in the playbook of, marketing, PR, and publicity stunts. So I don't know if this was the case in that instance, but I'm certainly that this quote-unquote trick was used a couple of times to create controversy around something. Like Beanie loved to do that, to create controversy, to make people and timelines full of people speaking about the same thing because he was controversial about a project.
Yeah, it's kind of an art as well in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's move on to one more thing before we close. I know you wanted to. I kind of want to discuss this from the business angle. You said in Wolfgame, which is a really cool game, that is probably the only really successful. Well, there's other successful blockchain games, but it's one of the main things that on Ethereum, which has been operating for a long time now, which has built this awesome community of super fans of the game, and it's kind of been operating in this really interesting way. They had a farmer's reveal in the last few days, I think, is what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And what did they do to make that process, thinking about the business angle, like what did they do to make that process good?
Yeah, I think in one sentence before I get to speak about the farmers is that what makes the Wolfgame community so strong is like the amount of detail that they put and the amount of work in detail that they put into everything that they do, because they are aware, as like 99% of the project, they don't have the full game out there, but what they have and what they put out there. They make sure that it's done in a really, unique way and really well executed. And for the farmer reveal, basically, you had like a reveal animation, which was a GIF that was like totally on brand with Wolf Game, and Roxel, like technology NF on Twitter, he looked at 200 different farmer reveal animations and found out, or 200 farmer reveal animations, and found out that there were at least 6 different animations that he could find, and that all kind of hinted at different skills or traits or functions that the farmers would have in the upcoming game. And also, like, from a marketing, going back to marketing, because we talked so much about it in this episode, they made it in a way that you can instantly share your farmer reveal on Twitter. You get the GIF, you get the image files to attach them to your tweet, and again, you make people talk about you. You have this different kind of animations, and people start to think what they're really about. Does this reveal animation mean that my farmer might be particularly good at acquiring followers, or particularly be good at finding rare items, because there was a metal detector in the animation, which was also an item used in a previous game, in the cave game that they had. So they are really managing with all the detail that they put into the reveals, into everything that they do, to create like a very strong lore that ultimately transpires into bonding the community together. Because despite the full game is not out there, they have a lot to talk about, which is what's really, helping to grow as a community. And this is what I find so fascinating about Wolf Game.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've done some very cool things in terms of maintaining and sustaining interest and excitement as they wait for the full game to develop. And also the amount of detail that they put into all sorts of, even their in real life events at New York, from what I heard,
that was amazing.
Pretty great. So that's definitely one to watch. Awesome. Legendary. Another good episode. That hour's gone pretty quick, I think. Yeah. Good stuff. Let's wrap it up there.
Beautiful.
Talk soon.